Let me start this way, America. Due process, illegal aliens, and the know-nothings. You're hearing it in the left-wing press, in the never-Trump editorial pages and columns, interviews with former federal prosecutors and more. You cannot and must not deport anyone without some kind of notice and due process. That's the American way. That's compelled by our Constitution. So I'm laying down a marker now. You'll hear this regurgitated elsewhere, no doubt, after. Yet no matter how much I look, I cannot find anything from these people on how this is supposed to actually work. What kind of due process are they talking about? The kind of due process that applies to citizens? If not, then what lower standard suffices as constitutional due process? And who decides? Immigration judges? Federal district judges? Exactly how would due process of any kind be administered to millions and millions of illegal immigrants? We don't have courts. That is, we don't have enough courts of any kind in our country to handle the tsunami of cases that would be involved in millions and millions of cases. In other words, our government could never process all these people, meaning a massive number of illegal immigrants would be able to stay here indefinitely. Effectively, this is massive amnesty. And how would we force them to appear in court in the first place? Even now, millions don't show up on their court dates. They just disappear into the population. This was all intentional. The border was open to anyone. In fact, aliens were encouraged to come here, and hundreds of thousands were flown into the country under a bastardized parole process, which was instituted by a Biden executive order in the contravention of federal law. This is the Cloward Piven strategy. Flood the system, overwhelm the system, break the system, and in doing so, achieve your goals. The same people in the Democrat Party and the media and their never-Trump sycophants who opened the border and solicited the illegal entry of millions of aliens into our country, and who don't give a damn about any of the women who were sold into sex slavery and the hundreds of thousands of missing unaccompanied minors, now claim to be concerned about due process when their objective is to prevent the deportation of millions of aliens they brought here in the first place. Oh, and to those legal analysts on websites and in the media, rather than your self-righteous moral preening, why don't you lay out your legal and administrative program so we can all benefit from your enlightened wisdom on how to remove millions of illegal aliens who are illegally imported by the Biden regime? That's all. What do you think of that, Mr. Producer? The point is, ladies and gentlemen, we don't even have a legal infrastructure to process millions and millions of people through some kind of due process rights. And what makes due process constitutional? Some lower level of due process. What's the standard? We don't have one. We don't know. Now, some might point, well, look at our immigration laws. Under this circumstance and uncircumstance, that's a little bit of the tail wagging the dog. It's not what I'm talking about, this circumstance or that circumstance. I'm talking about millions and millions of aliens who are in the country. You don't know in advance whether this or that applies. You got to find them and find out whether this or that applies. And it applies in a small percentage of the cases. The vast majority of the people who are here illegally, the crime that they committed is their presence here illegally. I'm just wondering how you're going to process them and how you're, first of all, you're going to force them to show up. And so there are serious issues here. And the people who masterminded this illegal immigration, massive importation in violation of our immigration laws, are now many of the same lawyers, same politicians, same think tanks and ethnic front groups who are complaining about due process. And for our friends at National Review, and I'm not going to call them out by name because I don't want to humiliate them, don't you get sick and tired of writing to yourselves? If you have a plan, let's see it. Let's see it now. If you believe due process should apply to everybody, and I mean everybody, before they're to be deported, then tell us what kind of due process. Full-throated due process that United States citizens get? Something short of that? Like what? What will withstand constitutional challenge? What does the Constitution compel? Write it. Tell us. Well, Congress can pass. No. This is an issue of due process under the Constitution. Congress can't change it by statute. You're not messing around here with one of these backbencher slip and fall lawyers. Somebody who actually knows the topic. I am asking you. I am calling you out. I am challenging you right now. What is the constitutional due process standard that you're thinking about? Who determines it? Administrative law judges, federal district judges? I assume the Supreme Court at some point will get to write it and make it up. So much for originalism, but nonetheless. Just tell me. And then tell me how administratively this is going to be enforced. You know, it's one thing to have a standard now, whatever that standard is, which I would love to see, so I can question it. But whatever that standard is, notice, they'll say. Okay, great, notice, whatever it is. How do you compel people to show up? How do you compel them to meet their scheduled court date? Which courts are we talking about? We certainly don't have enough administrative immigration judges, let alone federal judges. Can you imagine 10 million people flooding the system? There'll be no time for any other kind of cases. What should we do? Hire 10,000, 20, 50,000 administrative law judges? What should we do? Add another 1,000 of these genius lawyers to federal district judgeships? How are we going to handle this? I want to know. Because Biden destroyed the system. And what all these people are arguing for, hear me now, America, Mr. and Mrs. America, put down your sandwich, raise the radio in your car. Mr. and Mrs. America, what's going on here is an argument for massive amnesty. Because we cannot handle all this. It's impossible. We've never seen anything like this before. We've never seen anything like this before. I went back and looked at the due process issues that arose when Eisenhower had the military round up people and send them out of the country. Mexicans, many Mexican Americans accidentally. Notice how the Democrats and the media love Eisenhower. They figure he's a rhino, but he did what he did. He called it Operation Wetback. I didn't. That's a racist phrase. He used it. So did Cesar Chavez, by the way. Because he felt these people were purposely undermining the farm workers' union movement. But that aside, what they're asking for is something that's truly impossible. And they know it. And they know it. And they have radical judges backing them up. One in Boston, who just ruled that 500 and some thousand, I think it's 530,000, give or take, people who were actually flown into this country under an executive order signed by Biden. An executive order, which effectively rewrote the parole provision of our immigration laws. In other words, bastardized them. So he could bring them all in. She just ruled that you cannot deport those people, even though that was done by executive order and can be undone by executive order. She said no. Some sort of due process rights apply. And I'm sitting here scratching my head. Really? And which due process rights are you talking about? Which ones? I notice in the Supreme Court's ruling that everybody points to here, which I have in front of me, which is a tiny little thing, 8 or 9 pages, and half of it's the dissent. Well, did they dissent, or what did they do? What they always do. No, they didn't really dissent. They dissented, but said they didn't dissent. That would be Sotomayor and the rest, with their own disposition of the application. The relevant part of this that people are citing, people are debating over the language, and they're debating over it because the Supreme Court was ambiguous. That's why, and purposely so. The lower court's order properly requires the government to, quote-unquote, facilitate Abrego Garcia's, this is a guy from Maryland who's now a cause célèbre, an illegal alien who should be deported, his release from custody in El Salvador, and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. The intended scope of the term effectuate in the district court's order is, however, unclear and may exceed the district court's authority. The district court should clarify its directive with due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. For its part, the government should be prepared to share what it can concerning the steps it has taken and the prospect of further steps. The order hitherefore entered, the Chief Justice is vacated. You know what this says? Nothing. That's why people are fighting over it. It's a great victory. It's a great loss. The word facilitate, perfectly ambiguous, bureaucratic word. Effectuate. What they're saying here is, as I read the tea leaves, look, there is a separation of powers issue. The executive branch handles foreign policy. So when you say effectuate, lower court, you need to spell out exactly what you mean so you're not interfering in foreign policy and not violating separation of powers. In terms of the word facilitate, the government, meaning the Trump administration, needs to facilitate the release from custody in El Salvador of Garcia back to the United States. So the first part of the same of that sentence contradicts the next sentence. You need to facilitate the return, but effectuate in the district court's order, unclear how that may proceed. So clarify what you mean by effectuate, and while you're at it, government, facilitate. Now, Mr. Producer, does this make any sense to you? Let me read it again, the relevant part. The order properly requires the government to facilitate. They're putting quotes around it because that's the lower court's language. Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador, and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. The intended scope of the term effectuate in the district court's order is, however, unclear and may exceed the district court's authority. What's going on here? What the Supreme Court could have said to put an end to this is, look, maybe errors were made in this process, but as a practical matter, even if Mr. Garcia is returned, they will immediately institute deportation orders and have him removed anyway. Putting aside MS-13 and all the rest. Putting it aside. It's pointless. That's the point. Moreover, if the Supreme Court has some notion of what it means by a process, then spell it out. For the other 10 million illegal aliens. And tell us how the lower courts are supposed to handle this. Tell us. Or you have to leave it the National Review and the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal to go on and lecture and tell us absolutely zippo, nothing.